Where did the time go? All of a sudden, it's 10 a.m. Welcome to my 50th Facebook Live and my final one for the time being. You can watch all my previous ones on my website, aprilhenry.com, or on my YouTube channel, which is also called April Henry. All this week, or all these 10 weeks, I have been talking about various things. I've talked about makeup. Today, I'm wearing Kevin Aucoin mascara, which to my way of thinking is expensive, but I thought I would treat you guys. And one thing I like about it is I have done an hour and a half of karate sparring and it hasn't moved, and yet it washes off with soap and water. I'm also wearing a Patagonia shirt, and let me just say, best thing I ever did was befriending a woman in my Kung Fu class years ago who works for Columbia Sportswear. She doesn't take Kung Fu anymore, but she continues to put me on her friends and family list so I can get things Columbia Sportswear for 50% off. So, Evelyn, thank you. I've also been talking about books that I love. This is The Accidental Tourist by Ann Tyler. Always a read that I can come to and find a lot out of. Years ago, when I was starting to want to be a published writer, someone gave me the advice that you should type in the first chapter of a book you loved, and while you were typing it in, you should think about how they structured it. It would give you time to really think deeply about the words they used, how the rhythm of their sentences, how short or how long their paragraphs were, points of view, and that only by getting down into that granular detail of typing. Thanks, Michelle. Okay, I'll see if I can do, maybe I'll come back later and do some more. But for right now, this is it. Um, anyway, The Accidental Tourist by Ann Tyler, a really great book. I would totally recommend. So today I'm talking about my book that's coming out July 28th. It's called The Girl in the White Van. It was supposed to come out May 12th, but we all know what happened, the pandemic, and so they pushed it back. I feel a lot of feelings for people who had their first books come out in April and May, because it was very hard to get anyone's attention. And there's your first book that you've worked for years, and now nobody's noticing it. So I tried to buy books by as many of these new writers as I could so that I could support them and then tweet about their books so I could spread the word about how good they were. So, but for this book that's been pushed back till July 28th, I wanted to talk about 5 things that I learned writing it. One is that truth is stranger than fiction. Uh, this book came about when there was a guy named Kelly Swoboda. He was a bank robber who was out of prison, and he decided for some reason to become a kidnapper. So he started stalking girls, both in my neighborhoods and in some other neighborhoods in Portland, where but people and girls in my neighborhood were saying that this guy in a van was driving very slowly behind them, and the windows were steamed up, and they were very anxious about him. And his first target was a 23-year-old who was working at a tanning place, and he kidnapped her, forced her into a van, duct taped her wrists and ankles together, drove off with her, and she managed to get out of the van and jump while it was moving. Well, as you can imagine, you do not jump that well when your ankles and or your wrists are duct taped together. So she suffered a skull fracture and other injuries, but she did survive. So he then turned his sights to my neighborhood, and people were very concerned. Well, the police got a tip that a van matching his had been seen near the public library, which is near a bunch of places. It's near my martial arts school, and it's also just like 2 blocks from our local high school and about 5 blocks from a middle school. So the school resource officer and a regular uniformed officer, and they're both employed by Portland Police Department, confronted the guy, talked to him, and he's claimed that he was only going to the library. And so they let him go. because the plate that they looked at did not match the plate that had been reported. Well, they talked for a little bit, and then one of them was going to write up the report and walked around to the front of the van where there was a different license plate that didn't match the one in the back and realized it was the same guy. And he two people went into the library to try and find him, and one walked around the corner. So I'm sitting on the wall in front of my martial arts school, and it was ordered to stand up and show me your hands, stand up and show me your hands. And when he finally stood up, he pulled his hands out of his pockets and he was holding a gun, and he shot the school resource officer, and the school resource officer shot him, and he was killed in the ensuing gun battle. In his pockets, they found notes about the girls that he had been following. He would write down what they looked like, what they were wearing, where he saw them, what time he saw them, and he would rate them on a scale of 1 to 10. So I was like, oh my gosh, that is like one of my books come to life. So, but sometimes reality is too much. Like when they looked in Swoboda's van, they found teen pornography, a padlock, ropes, chains mounted to the floor. Most of my readers are in seventh and eighth grade. I decided some of those details, especially the teen pornography or the pornography featuring teens, was not going to be in my book. It was just too graphic. So I kept it to that he restrains my main character with duct tape. Another thing I learned is in this book is story adjacent stories. I always like stories that are not quite the main story, but are an interesting facet that is near the main story. So when I started doing research on what happens when a child goes missing and how the family copes with it, it was fascinating. Some parents will immediately accept and believe that their child is dead. Other parents will even go so far as to imagine that their child has been taken by a nice couple who can't have children of their own and is being raised by them. And it's just different ways that people have to cope with trauma. Some of the people who are most affected are siblings. Your sibling has disappeared, so it's very easy for your parents to overlook you as they focus on finding them, or for them to become hyper vigilant about you. And the child themselves has to deal with feelings of guilt for surviving, and also an odd kind of celebrity, like people who had siblings that were kidnapped talked about people asking for their autograph like they were somehow famous. So when I was doing this book, I thought, well, I'm going to make it that the bad guy is being confronted by the police, and as this is happening, the door behind him opens up, and a girl who's taking the noon kung fu class walks out, and he takes her hostage, and then they leave. But almost as soon as I started researching that, I realized I couldn't write it. It's a scene you see a lot in TV shows and movies, but it's not accurate, or at least it shouldn't be. Police are taught never to let the hostage leave with the bad guy because they know it's not going to be any better for them when they leave. So I needed a new scenario. So I thought, what if the girl had quarreled with her mom's boyfriend, and then he says she's never going to get to go to kung fu class again. She runs off, goes to kung fu class, and then disappears after that, and people think she's run away in rebellion for him saying she can't do it. And so with a lot of Googling, I found the Portland Police Department's juvenile runaway unit, left a message there. I had to call several times, but ended up talking to an officer who walked me through what she would think about a runaway. I also decided that my character would try to unsuccessfully escape and would hit her head in the process and have a concussion. So I talked to my guy who was teaching me jiu-jitsu, Chris Bauer, about what does concussion feel like. I decided that my bad guy would hold the girl hostage in an old RV. So I looked around. I found this lady who had a blog called RVing the USA is Our Big Backyard. And I sent her all kinds of weird questions about holding somebody hostage in an RV. I also needed a reason. I did not, even though in most cases, I think girls who are kidnapped end up raped. I didn't want my characters to end up raped, but I wanted it to be plausible. So I thought, what if the first girl he took tried to escape and was bitten by a junkyard dog? So I Googled, and do not do this. I Googled dog bite face and then clicked on images. And I saw some very intense photos, which is why you don't want to do it. I saw one photo of a girl who looks very serene, even though most of her seems to be gone. And then the second photo shows her after she has been surgically reconstructed, and really you can't tell, except for some very faint lines, that she had this big dog bite to the center of her face. And so I emailed that plastic surgery practice that had put those photos up and ended up talking to the plastic surgeon himself, responded to me, and we ended up talking when he was walking his dog. And he gave me all kinds of advice about how I could work things out for my character. Um, so those are some of the things I did when I was researching. The last thing that I learned was to try it myself. Your imagination can only take you so far. So sometimes you need to even see or do for yourself. So after I had decided that an old RV would make a good place to hold a hostage, I found this Portland's derelict RV towing program, and I took some doing, but I got this guy to give me a tour of old RVs, and he was not a reader. He wasn't into books at all. But when I asked him if he were going to be hold a hostage inside of an RV, he had lots of ideas. And then when I asked him, how do you get out of an RV, he had even more ideas. And one of the things that he had talked about was getting out through the ceiling vent. And I realized after I came home and started working on it that I hadn't taken any pictures of the ceiling vent. So I went back to Karen, who has the RV blog, and she sent me some photos of her ceiling vent, and they were fastened with Phillips screws. So then I Googled what to use when you don't have a Phillips screwdriver. And so there was tons of things listed, and I picked all the things that I thought a person might have in an old RV if they're being held hostage. And then I tried them out to see if any of them would budge these Phillips screws. And it turns out a potato peeler is actually really good if you guys ever run out of and need a Phillips screwdriver. So I even visited a wrecking yard to see what might be lying around if a person was running through it and needed some weapons. And the people at the Sherwood Pick and Pull were very friendly and helpful. And of course, it turns out there was tons of things lying on the ground. So those are some of the things that I did for this book. It's called The Girl in the White Van, coming out July 28th. If you have something that you want me to talk about, comment here and I will try and schedule a later one and let you guys know in advance when I'm going to do it. Other than that, you guys have a great summer, and I will talk to you later. Bye bye.